Alright, I don't know what's going on with my audio. I promise I will get it figured out for next week. I apologize for the really terrible sounding audio. I'll try not to talk too loud because I know that could be pretty jarring. Hi, I'm Evie Lynn, and welcome to Cloud Seeding. Tonight's going to be really rough. It's been quite a week, and I haven't had a lot of time to prepare. So hopefully we can get some people on and kind of get the ball rolling with cloud seeding. So what cloud seeding is, if you didn't see my other video, is it's kind of advanced brainstorming. Instead of just sitting around and thinking of random things, I'll actually be sharing with you some ideas that I've already had, and then I'm seeing it on the line. It's really tired, guys. It's been a really long week. So I'll be sharing some ideas that I've had for stories, and hopefully you can take those and make them your own, and you can share your ideas here too. We love to hear from everybody and what you've come up with, and try to help you flesh some things out. Any ideas that I give you, you are welcome to run with. I'm claiming no copyright on any of the ideas that I'm sharing here. I have plenty of others that I'm working on myself. So these are ones that have come to me that I don't think I'm going to be able to flesh out and do justice to devote the amount of time to flesh out and do justice to that I would like to. So hopefully you guys will be able to utilize some of that. And I'm sorry, this is new to me. I have been on other people's streams, but this is my first time streaming, so please bear with me. As you can tell from my audio, no idea what I'm doing. We will figure it out, and it will gradually get better. I'm sure a lot of you guys probably could tell me, hey, push this button, hey, do this, and be able to do it a lot better than I can. So hopefully some of y'all will jump on and help me out a little bit. I will strive to do a better job of preparing next time. If you saw my other video, I got ready to get on last night and realized that there was water all under the sink in my kitchen. So didn't get to get on last night. But I'm here now. And I don't have a very good light at this point either, because my other light broke. We're just going to get through it at this point. So, for tonight, I'm going to look through some of the ideas on my list here that I wanted to share with you guys, and hopefully something will jump out. Hopefully we'll get some more people on. Something will jump out that will work for one of you guys. So kind of I hate to start with kind of a little bit of a morbid one, but let's go. So I know most of you have probably read 1984. It was required reading for a long time. If you haven't read it, it's basically the government takes control of every aspect of your life. They listen to every word you say, they know every move you make, and are able to kind of control what you do and when you do it. And, it's not really a great thing, obviously. And shockingly, a lot of it's actually coming true. They can hear everything we say if they want to. Hopefully they're not. Honestly, personally, there's not really much they'd be interested in, but still, we would like to think that we have a lot more privacy than we actually do. So, switching mics to see if that one picks up a little better. I can't actually hear because it's not coming through my headphones. I would like to figure out how to do that. But in the meantime, until I figure out some of this stuff. So the idea that I am going with, sorry, I'm looking at some settings while I'm doing this. So if it's using the one that I want. Okay. So, a modern day take on our current issues in a 1984 type style. This one would be based on if there were a number of crop diseases that ravish our food supply, and not necessarily natural crop diseases, more of bioterrorism. But to control it, the government makes it illegal to grow your own food. So, a little bit of background on this because it sounds kind of strange. With certain diseases, and I am not a farmer, so if you are, forgive me if I get this totally wrong, but my understanding is that with certain diseases, like with livestock and whatnot, it can travel very easily from one farm to another. And so sometimes they will have to go in and cull animals that they know have this disease or isolate them to prevent it from spreading. So taking that to an extreme, let's say that there were these crop diseases that they're, spread by spores. Very easy for the wind to pick them up, take them wherever, right? Or they're spread by local animal populations. Again, very easy for them to move a pretty fair distance in a very short period of time. So, in this idea, the government has come up with cures, which are treatments for the plants. But the cures that they've developed are very scarce, so they can't just hand them out to everybody, say, hey, use these on all your homegrown tomatoes, use these on the corn you've got in your backyard. You have this small farm, go ahead and use this so you've got something to take to the farmer's market, And while it is livelihood for a lot of these people or what they feed their families, there just isn't enough of the cure to go around. So they select farms that have great output, that have great potential to feed larger numbers of people, and they provide the treatment to these particular farms. And they actually outlaw growing plants. And this would be diseases that are specific to food crops. Obviously, you can't just eliminate all plants, so it's not really going to work in a practical sense. But they would say, hey, you can't grow corn, you can't grow beans, you can't grow squash, because these have been attacked. These are, staples of our food supply, and this is what has been attacked are these big staple crops that we use. And obviously, it would be more than just those three. But so people aren't being allowed to grow those. Only these large farms can grow them, and there's a huge food scarcity because of it. Now, it begins with a benevolent reason of trying to control these diseases, trying to keep people fed, trying to preserve as much of our food supply as possible, so we don't, as a country, as a population, starve to death. But the result is now the government has control of the food supply. People aren't allowed to be self-sufficient. And I think that would be an interesting dynamic to work with. What would that look like? after the crisis is over? Do they give back control? Or do they keep it? Do they maintain it? Kind of thinking, hey, we've got control of the entire food supply because we've provided these cures. You have to give a percentage back to us because we preserved your farm, or you have to let us buy all your food. You can't just go out and sell it. And we'll decide how it's divvied out. We being the government, obviously. Um, I think you could really do a lot with that. Personally, I'm not going to delve into that level of research for this particular topic. There are other topics I delve into Google's research and go down really deep rabbit holes with. But this particular topic, it's not one that holds my attention enough right now for me to really jump into. But I would love to see that done. I would love to see what you could do with that. I would love to know how that story plays out and how that ends. You could look at it from a wide perspective of, what it does to us as a whole as a country. You could come at it as an angle from inside the government. Those in the government who are corrupt, which one would presume would be a lot, as versus maybe there's a handful of people who are still good, who are not corrupt, and who don't want to see this level of control happen long term. Obviously, for the storyline, it has to happen short term in order to keep us all alive and fed, to keep the disease from spreading and wiping out everything. And there again, you'd have to tweak this plot line a lot. Like I said, these are ideas that I have not worked with a lot. There are plot holes all in just that little bit that I have said. So it would require some thinking through and working through that to sew up those holes, shall we say. For example, one plot hole, well, if they have this cure, then what's the difference if everything else gets wiped out? Is there concern that it might spread to other crops other than the ones it's targeting? Because as you know, with a lot of diseases, they can mutate and they can end up jumping species. We see that with bird flu, that it jumps species. I know that there's a lot of our major diseases that have jumped species in the past. So not necessarily jumping from a plant to a human, but from one type of plant to another type of plant, and it can end up wiping out more than just these select food crops, but it could wipe out trees, it could wipe out grass, it could wipe out so much of what we depend on to make us be self-sufficient as a nation and our survivability. I'm going to stumble through a lot of words, like I said, long week. So, as I said, you could come at it from a lot of different perspectives. You could come at it from the perspective of a small farmer now not being allowed that source of income that they've depended on, possibly for their whole lives. Possibly, it could be a young person. Hey, I just majored in agriculture. This is what I was planning on doing with my life, was going into farming. And now all of a sudden I'm being told, hey, you're not allowed to do that, or you have to plant, these other crops that aren't very profitable. What's that going to do? You bet your whole future on this. What's that going to do to you? Older farmer, done it my whole life. Now what? Of course, a lot of farmers are very resourceful. I know. There again, you could look at it from that perspective of the resiliency, the skills that are developed being a farmer. I have never met a farmer that did not know how to fix an engine, how to build equipment they needed, how to make do with what was available, how to jerry rig things and get the job done. That's just part of farming, is you just get it done and figure it out, So there's a lot of resiliency there, that even in the face of something drastic and tragic, there will be those that won't come through it, from a financial perspective, but there'll also be those that will figure something out. So that might be an interesting angle to look at. You could come at it from an angle of someone in the city or the suburbs who they don't grow anything. They're not farmers. They have nothing to do with the industry. They have nothing to do with the government, but the food scarcity affects them. Things that they formerly could just go to the store and get, now there's none available. Well, does a black market develop because of that? Is there a push for international trade? Are we bringing things over the border illegally? Are things being grown illegally? As we know, that has happened a lot in the past, that certain plants were outlawed and got grown anyway by a whole lot of people, and kept that industry supplied for a really long time. Some of those plants have now become legal, some still aren't. There again, personally don't have any firsthand experience with any of that. It's not a topic I've ever delved into. I'm sure there are a lot of y'all that know a whole lot more about that than I do. But maybe some of these crops that have been affected by this disease, now those are the ones. They've been told, hey, you can't grow this because this disease is spreading and we don't want it to jump species. Well, now, do we grow those in secret, in basements with grow lights, on rooftops? Rooftops would be harder to do in this day and age, I feel like, because of drones. There's so much air traffic, so much satellite surveillance. I feel like if you're trying to do something in secret, that it's a lot harder to do now than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. Actually, kind of harder to do than it was 5 years ago. There again, I have no experience with that, but it's an interesting angle to work. We could look at the perspective of a short-term, what is happening in the midst of all this, or we could come at it from a long-term angle. What problems does this cause down the road? What does this do to our children's children? What does life look like for them after all this? If the government retains control, what does that look like long term? If they give it back, now we know they can take it. What does that do to the psychological state of us as citizens in relation to our government? Does it make us less trusting? Does it make us more trusting? They're able to sustain our food sources and do give back the power that they took. Do we trust them more now? There will always be critics, no matter what is done, what decisions are made. There will be some people that support it and some people that do not. Every issue, every decision is going to have two sides to it. So you could explore both sides. You could explore those who support, a government taking control for supposedly, beneficial purposes, as versus those who don't think they should take control at all, and survival of the fittest. The survival of the fittest angle is interesting. I'm thinking of, some of the Dust Bowl stories and that I've read about those who got through that and those who didn't. The Depression era stories. Those who were able to grow food in their backyards, and those who were able to pivot and pursue other paths came through the Depression days a lot better than those who weren't. Knowledge is power. Are we losing knowledge as a nation, as a species? Our ancestors knew how to do everything for themselves, and the further we have gone in time, the less we know how to do for ourselves. We have become very interdependent. We depend on a lot from our government. We depend on a lot from our farmers. We depend on them to provide for us. We depend on each other, not in as much of a community sense, because I feel like we've lost a lot of our feelings of community, our interactions as a community. But we depend on each other a lot more in a practical sense than I feel like we used to. If you've ever tried to grow vegetables in your backyard, you'll know that it's not something you can just decide to do and it's automatically done. It's got a learning curve. You've got to figure out how much does this plant need to be watered, how to amend the soil over here. What do we do when this type of bug attacks? What do we do when that type of bug attacks? What do I do if, this fungus gets on this plant? How much sun does this need? Where in my yard do I need to plant that? There's a lot of little factors, and it's not that growing plants is hard, depending on the plant and where you live. But it's a lot of knowledge that's required for it, for each individual plant, because you can be great at growing tomatoes, not have a clue how to grow okra. They're different plants, and they have similar requirements, but they're not exactly the same. And you're going to have to do things just a little different for each plant, sometimes drastically different. So what does that look like? What does the loss of that knowledge for the general population over time look like in a crisis where food becomes scarce? And pursuing that, kind of getting away from that idea, but into another one. What are some other scenarios that might happen that would cause us to have to try to be more self-sufficient? That we would need those skills for? A lumber shortage? I don't know. Would we have to figure out how to reuse reclaimed lumber? It's possible. Anything's possible, especially with the way our world is right now. I'm trying to adjust this light so it's not glaring off my glasses so bad. I really need my other light. I feel like every time I get it off my glasses, it creates these huge, horrible shadows. Hopefully it's not bothering you as much as it's bothering me. So, What are some other things that I'm thinking through, things that we used to be able to do, people used to do for themselves that now we depend on others to do? Even something as simple as burying our dead. We farm that out to outside sources now, and used to be bodies were prepared at home. Families dug the graves. They knew how deep to dig them. They knew, how to handle a shovel, what type of shovel to use. I've had to bury a couple of pets. I'm going to be honest, it is not as easy as they make it look like on TV. On TV, somebody will walk out there with a shovel, and 10 minutes later they've got a 6-foot hole, just perfectly rectangular, to put somebody in. It's not like that in real life. The last time we had to dig for a pet, my sweet, sweet dog that I had for a decade and a half had passed away. Very tragically, very sad. I guess it wasn't really tragic. He was really old and he had been sick for a while. It was kind of expected, but at the same time, you never really expect it on the day it happens. But we went out there. It was getting dark, so we were trying to get it done before it was all the way dark, get him buried, and lay him to rest. And we had 2 shovels, one pointed, one square. And I want to tell you, I thought we were never going to finish digging that hole. And it's not like we were digging a 6-foot hole here. It wasn't that big of a dog. And it's not like we were trying to bury it super, super deep, because we have a fenced-in backyard that nothing's really going to get in to dig. There's nothing I'm really worried about digging, my poor dog up. It's not easy. These are skills that our ancestors knew how to do, and there are people today that know how to do it. When I say all this, that we don't know how to do it, I mean the general population. There are obviously people that know how to do each of these things, and there are some people that could be 100% self-sufficient and be just fine. I admire those people. I wish I was one of those people. I wish I had the wherewithal to become one of those people. Unfortunately, I'm a writer, and I'm much more comfortable writing about those people than I am being a person like that. But for those of you that do know those survival skills, you're awesome. Building, your own shelter. Let's say we have some kind of termite invasion. I don't know. You think about the locust invasions in the Bible and how they wiped out crops. What if we had a termite invasion? There again, could have a locust invasion that takes out a lot of the crops. They would be a very indiscriminate eater, I would think, though. I don't know. Do termites eat everything, or do they eat just certain plants? I have no idea. Interesting thing to research. Maybe not an interesting thing to research, but it's a perspective to look at it. But what if we had a termite invasion? I don't know how fast termites can spread. I don't think it would be super fast, but they do have wings. So I don't know, maybe superbug termites come and they're eating the wood out of our houses, and we're having to scramble to rebuild new shelters. And they get in certain types of trees that we would use for houses, accidental pun there. And now we don't have enough wood. What would that look like? It's a lot of interesting scenarios that we could come up with that would make it more difficult for us to get by. Shelter building. I haven't thought of that one before. It's interesting. I don't know if any of you have watched any of these survival shows where they have to go out and hunt and build shelters and things. But it's not an easy thing, even for people who are very well prepared. There's only one guy that I've seen. I think it was on Alone, maybe. But he was able to build decent shelter. I mean, it wasn't, the Hilton or anything. He built a pretty decent shelter, built a furniture and stuff just out of, whatever wood he could find where they dropped him off at. And that was the only guy I ever remember seeing that really had it made with just what he could throw together himself. But even all these people that prepare, for these types of shows, shelters are usually not that great, especially at first. So what if we had to build shelters, and what would we use if these hardwoods were compromised and weren't available? I don't know. I'm trying to think what a lot of houses, I don't think a lot of houses even use hardwood the way they used to. I think most of them are built out of pine now. There again, interesting thing to research. I say interesting. Okay, let's be honest, it's not all that interesting. It could be interesting, I don't know. Depends on how far down a rabbit hole you want to go with things. When did we pick these trees to use? Who decided which trees were good and which weren't? Why do we pick certain trees? Why don't we pick certain trees? There are certain trees that I feel like are better for building than others, but we don't use them as much because they're more scarce. Take longer to grow. I think that's why pine is used so much in building, is because it grows so fast and you can farm a lot of it all at once. I know they take and cut entire pine forest down and then replant it or let it come back up on its own even. And it relatively does not take that long. I don't know what the age is they have to wait to cut these trees. I know things like, I think things like cedar and oak take a lot longer to grow, to mature to the point of usability for wood. Cypress, I think those are harder to find, especially depending on what area you live in. I know cypress is used for some things. I only know this because, personal story, I only know this because I helped my grandfather build his house that he lived in the latter part of his life. He took an old building that was just, I think, like 4 cinder block walls. I don't think it even had a roof on it, and just totally rebuilt it. Put a roof on, brand new electrical, built on, a couple of more areas of the house. It was still a small house, obviously. They didn't need much at that point in their lives. Weren't having a lot of overnight company. Weren't hosting big dinners or anything. But he cut and planed his old cypress off of his land. Didn't have a big hand in that, obviously, but I did help him with some small jobs. So yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about. What would we do if we couldn't just hire a contractor to come fix problems with our house? I had one house where there was termite damage, but it was very minor. They caught it really early, treated it. We didn't even have to tint the house or anything. I mean, it was very, very, very minor. It was very isolated. We caught it super early, and we were able to treat it pretty quickly. And there again, I don't know all the protocols for termites either, for how all that works. I think I was in the middle of a sentence and lost track. I'm going to do that a lot. If you didn't watch my previous videos, I have very severe ADHD. It's one reason why I'm sharing ideas with you guys, because I have all these ideas that I would love to write about, but I have 10 million of them and no attention span. So I will sit down and work on a story. I'll get 2, 3, 4 files, sometimes 30 pages in, and I'm completely bored with it. And if I'm bored with it, I'm not going to be able to write it in such a way that anybody else is going to want to read it. So instead of just sitting there with writer's block with hundreds of stories unfinished, I decided, why not share them with you? Why not share some ideas that I've had? Okay, granted, the ones that I've gotten 30 or 40 pages on, I'm going to keep, try to work on later. Hopefully inspiration will hit again. The ones that I've just jotted down, a few sentences of an idea here, paragraph there, a couple of pages, those, unless it's something I'm really excited about, they're not worth, my time if I don't have the inspiration for them. But I have found that by talking through these things, I can get other people excited. And I hope that's what I've done for you tonight. I hope that you found a little nugget of something that you want to explore, even if it doesn't turn into a bestseller novel, something that will get you writing, even if it's just practice, even if it's just something for yourself. And it doesn't have to be novels. I wrote a poem the other day. It's the first time I'd written a poem in probably 6 or 7 years. And I loved it. It was a beautiful little poem, if I do say so myself. It's nothing I'm going to share with anybody. It was something just for me. But I realized I missed that. And I'm not a poet. Not a poet at all. To give you a little of my background, I did freelance writing for quite a long time. I'm not a professional writer. You probably have figured that out by now. It's a hobby. It's something I enjoy doing. I did minor in English, didn't even major in it. Took the advice of my father and went for something a little more substantial, a little easier to make money with, trying to support myself. It's always a good thing when you can support yourself, you can feed yourself. That is very hard to make writing a career, and you have to love it. You have to love what you're doing. And if you love it, it doesn't have to be a career. If you love it, you're going to do it no matter what. Even if you end up taking a break. I took a really long break from writing at one point in my life because of some things I was going through from an emotional standpoint, which was weird because when I was younger and now I'm a little older, I channel my emotions into my writing, but I just didn't have the heart for it during that time. And that's okay. It's okay to put it down and pick it back up again. It's okay to start a story and put it aside for however long you need to. There have been writers that had an idea for a story, wrote a little on it, stuck it in a filing cabinet, didn't touch it again for decades, and ended up being the best story they ever wrote. Sometimes you just have to let your life catch up to your story, and that's okay. Not all writing has to be a bestseller. Your writing is beautiful, and it's a part of your soul. So even if it's a haiku, even if it's a little snippet of an idea, it's still a beautiful part of you, and a beautiful part of your talent, and a beautiful part of your story. I hope that you guys have enjoyed tonight. I hope that you will join me again next week at the latest. I might squeeze on here one other time in between. Maybe. I don't know. I'm hoping next week will be a little less hectic than this week. Have a great night, guys. Enjoy your writing. Enjoy your evening or morning, depending on where you are and when you're watching this. Above all else, just keep writing.